Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you all. We are joined by Chief Bryant, our Chief Operating Officer, John King, our Chief of Staff, Carmen Chubb, and members of our Advisory Council. I don't know whose phone that is. Oh, that's our phone. Okay. All right. Can we put it on silence? Oh, okay. We're getting back into the swing of things. You know, we've been out of practice for a while. Joining us from our advisory council, who's put in so much work over the past couple of months, we have Brenda Muhammad, Dorothy Hurst, Dave Wilkerson, Andrea Boone, our council member, Michael Langford, Courtney Smith. Did I miss anyone from the advisory council? All right, and also we have our Deputy COO, LaShondra Burks, with us today. This has been some really important work, and as you all know, we have experienced an uptick in crime, not just in our city, but across the country over the past year, and this really has called for all hands on deck. And we had a press conference a couple of months ago where I said that, you know, we essentially been doing everything and throwing everything, including the kitchen sink, at crime. And I was calling for the convening of an advisory council to really take a fresh look at what we are doing to help us determine what more we should and could do. And so I'll call the members of the advisory council. They included, I mentioned, Councilmember Andrea Boone, Dorothy Hurst, who's a member of the Atlanta Citizens Review Board representing MPUs M through R, Michael Langford, Regional Vice President, the Atlanta Community Involvement Center and West Care Foundation, Councilmember J.P. Mazakite from District 8, Brenda Muhammad, the Executive Director of the Atlanta Victims Assistance Incorporated, Deborah Scott, CEO of Georgia Stand Up, Randall Slaughter, our retired Atlanta Fire Rescue Chief, Courtney Smith, President and LPC Midtown Neighbors Association, Carol Tomei, CEO of UPS, George Turner, who's retired APD Chief and with the Atlanta Hawks, Renata Turner, the presiding judge of Fulton County Juvenile Court, Dave Wilkinson, President and CEO of the Atlanta Police Foundation, Matthew Wesley Williams, President of ITC, and also a FAMU Rattler, might I add, and Sally Yates, partner at King and Spalding, Special Matters and Government Investigations, and also, as you all know, a former Attorney General, I'm having a brain freeze, for the Northern District of Georgia, and also, I believe, acting Attorney General for a time. Also, I don't know if Dr. Halpert is here with us. There he is. Dr. John Halpert is joining us, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Grady Hospital. You have heard many of us say that violence is a public epidemic, and it certainly is fitting that we have one of our strongest health partners join us in this work. And I believe, Carmen, do we have the list of the presenters to the committee? Did we get that? Okay, so John will be able to share more on that. Okay, I was asking because we've had so many incredible presenters to this advisory council, so I want to make sure that they are acknowledged as well, but our COO will share that information. I want to also thank the Biden administration. The Biden administration has been a solid partner with us in this work. When I visited the White House in March with several governors and mayors from across the country, as we talked about COVID-19, it was at that time one of the many times that I've had the opportunity to elevate this concern to our president and to his administration, what we were seeing in the aftermath of COVID and the unrest that we had last summer. Unfortunately, we had a preview before many other cities because our state was open and there were many people coming into our cities, coming into our city. So we were starting to see an uptick in crime before many other major cities. And unfortunately, what we saw was just not something happening in Atlanta. We've seen it spread throughout the country as other cities have reopened. And with the leadership of the Biden administration, you all are aware of the announcement that was made last month that Atlanta would join 14 other jurisdictions for a community violence intervention collaborative. We had already identified $5 million in our American Rescue Funds towards violence intervention work. On yesterday, led by Ambassador Susan Rice and other members of the Biden administration, we had an opportunity to share not just with other mayors, but also with community leaders and partners who've been doing the real work in our communities in this area for a very long time. There was a pilot program in MPUV, which includes Adair Park, Mechanicsville, Peoplestown, Pittsburgh, Summerhill, and the Summerhill area, and it showed some really promising results. This program, this pilot program, Violence Intervention Program, Cure Violence, was implemented in 2020. It's still underway, but to date, police have seen about a 50% decrease in violent crime in the area, and so we know that it works. The data shows that it works. So we will be using our American Rescue Funds to begin with, expanding that program in the city, but also our advisory council has made some additional recommendations on how we can leverage those funds. So I will share more of this information with you. The advisory council evaluated 7 key initiatives led or coordinated by the mayor's office that are already underway, and 34 actions led or coordinated by the Atlanta Police Department. Overall, the advisory council believes that the city has a very broad crime strategy plan, but our efforts would be better focused if we really honed in on this strategy to specific locations and specific individuals who are most afflicted by crime. This framework will help determine where imminent violence crime reduction initiatives should be implemented and where they can have the most impact in reducing violent crime. And just a couple of things that I would share that struck me from this report that you all will also get a copy of. The Advisory Council looked at data. Roughly 70% of violent crimes, defined as homicide, rape, aggravated assault, and robbery, are committed by people between the ages of 25 and older. Youth under 16 years of age committed 10% of the violent crimes, and also the victims were similarly concentrated, with victims on average being between 20 and 29. We were able to determine in 46% of the homicides committed in the city the relationship between the victim and the perpetrator. Of the 46% where we were able to determine that relationship, the perpetrator knew the victim in 70% of the homicides. So this speaks to what Chief Bryant has said repeatedly about the need for conflict resolution in our communities. 90% of our homicides were caused by guns. APD has worked to address guns, seizing 939 weapons to date, year to date. And also, repeat offenders committed 18% of all felony cases adjudicated in Fulton County. Those are very sobering statistics. So based on the review of this data and the presentations that were made to the advisory committee, the advisory programs, to continue and or begin critical initiatives with a clear focus on specific individuals most afflicted by violent crime. This will include public awareness campaigns, to work with community stakeholders to build capacity and infrastructure in locations and neighborhoods experiencing violence, expand community violence intervention programs within targeted locations, partnering with institutions like Grady to help conflict mediation and resolution to reduce retaliatory violence. APD should continue working with communities to conduct security assessments and develop plans in targeted areas. Expand APD's repeat offender unit to track violent repeat offenders to ensure cases are properly adjudicated. Continue to increase the resources of the APD license and permit team to enhance nuisance property enforcement. These are the clubs that are operating after hours. Continue to focus on hiring 250 additional police officers in FY22, which we've committed to, also continuing our commitment to expand the Operation Camera Network and increase the use of license plate readers, to continue implementation of our Light Up the Night initiative to add 10,000 new streetlights by December 31st, 2022 in target areas. The council also recommends an investment of $70 million to fund these actions and initiatives. $50 million coming from public funding, and the remaining $20 million coming from philanthropic and nonprofit partners, further underscoring what we've said all along, that it really will take a village to make a dent and to make a difference. So again, thank you to the members of our advisory council. As you all know, we set a goal at the beginning of the summer of hiring 1,000 youth through our Hire Atlanta Youth Program. Today, we have exceeded that goal. We have employed 1,400 youth in just the past 3 months. Our Youth Entrepreneurship Program is also off to a great start. We've secured $2 million in funding. We've had 87 youth participate in this program, creating 7 major private-public partnerships. This has also impacted our ability to engage with our water boys. I believe that number is at 87 that we have engaged with them to offer them services, but I liken it to many in our homeless population. It will take more than one touch point. It will likely take several touch points because as we were discussing back in the back, the reality is they are making a lot of money without structure, without the need for discipline. So it is going to be a heavy lift to give them an incentive to come into a program that's a lot less structured, and the money may be a little less, but certainly the benefits will be long-lasting and also a lot more safe. So again, to the public, we know that you are well-intentioned when you are stopping on the corners and you are giving them money, but if it looks chaotic and it looks as if they are putting themselves in danger, we just ask that you not feed into it by giving them money and purchasing water. Part of our public campaign will also be to inform the public as to how they can help redirect many of these young people to some of these services that are available because they just may not know that they exist. And with that, I will call up Chief Rodney Bryan, and I will come back to the podium after he's done with an update on our missing and murdered children investigation and also to open up for questions.
Good morning, and thank you, Mayor, for your leadership in convening this group that I think will give a lot of help and direction as it relates to us continuing to combat crime. As the mayor stated, the city of Atlanta had the opportunity to see violent crime begin to increase much sooner. than many of our other major cities, but it also gave us the ability to put a plan together and a strategy together ahead of other major cities as well. One of the things that I thought that was important during that time was to ensure we solicit the assistance of our federal partners and our other state partners. And doing that, I think that has allowed us to really start seeing have an impact on where we are with crime currently. Even though we are still up, as the mayor stated, we're starting to see those numbers come down tremendously. At the beginning of the year, many of you reported that we were 60% up in our homicide rate. Today, we're less than 25% up in our homicide rate, meaning that we are actually putting a dent in that violent crime and believing that the strategies that we have in place are actually working. And when asked what we contribute this to, one of the things you have to understand is last year this time, our police officers' focus was much different. We were out protecting and addressing civil disturbance throughout our city. We were out defending police properties. The morale of our police officers were tremendously low. We have begun to see that tide turn. Our police officers are very active in the streets, and to think and say anything otherwise is harmful to what our officers continue to do every day. So our focus have changed. We have the ability to be much more proactive in the spaces that we are seeing violence. One of the things that I thought was also important is that we centralize our police department, our investigation section. So now we have an investigation division that targets both major crime, property crimes, and special enforcement section. This gives us the ability to be more strategic in how we are investigating crime, more efficient and more effective in our investigation as well. As I measure and have conversations with our leadership team every single week to see how things are progressing, everyone believes that this new strategy is the most effective, and we are really seeing the impact as it relates to what we're doing. I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge our federal partnerships and our state partnerships. Last year, as I stated, when we were seeing the violent crimes increase, I reached out to all of our federal partners, all of our state partners, to see who was willing to come in and assist us. And all were willing and were helpful in putting together plans and strategies to do so. The FBI, the DEA, the ATF, all have been phenomenal. Our state partner, Georgia State Patrol and GBI, have been very helpful as well. Our local partners, the Fulton County Sheriff's Office and the other municipality police officer departments, we all come together and speak regularly, understanding that the crime problem we're seeing is not an Atlanta problem. This is a regional problem that you can replicate throughout our nation. And so for the mayor to put together this task force, I think will be helpful. To support the idea of bringing on 250 police officers in the next year, and for us to be able to restructure what we're doing as it relates to background and recruitment, working with the Atlanta Police Foundation to come up with bonuses and strategies to bring in new applicants, I think is, again, forward thinking. As you all know, you could ride through our city and see billboards up for police departments and police agencies all around our city. And that's because of the climate that we're in. But again, the mayor's office and the support of the city council all are on board. And when I think that when you find all groups working for one cause, it allows us to get things done. And so I'm confident that we'll be able to reach that goal of 250. Operation Shield, our camera network, I think that for this task force to support that idea will be very helpful. The camera network system that we have in the city of Atlanta is bar none better than any that you'll find in this nation. It is very helpful. It gives us the ability to be in places that we cannot have police officers. But it also allows us to have phenomenal work as it relates to our investigation. And then our repeat offender coordination, expanding that. I think that's a wonderful idea, because what that does is it allows us to work with the other agencies, our state partners over at the county, the DA's office, bringing the courts in line for us to all really be targeted and focused on really having an impact on crime where we're seeing the problems that exist. And so, Mayor, again, I thank you for bringing this task force together, because it also allows us to bring in other. One of the things that when you read through this report, you will not see them say that there needs to be a level of increased police enforcement. And that's because I believe that the police officers are doing all that they can do. What it does says is that we bring in civic organizations, and we bring in nonprofit, and we bring in other entities to do non-enforcement in areas that we continue to see systemic problems. And so, with that being said, thank you, Madam Mayor, for your leadership. I'll turn it back over to you.
The mayor just asked me to speak a little bit about some of the presenters that presented to the advisory council, just to give you a sense of, through the 4 meetings that this advisory council had, combined with 2 work sessions, who all was involved in this work. So in the first 4 meetings, and you'll see in the full report the specific topics that were discussed, we had a diverse array of staff members from the city, as well as some outside presenters, helping to make sure that people understood the variety of initiatives that were going on within the city, and help to bring about discussion and brainstorm on new ideas or initiatives to either expand or build upon what was already going on. In addition to that, we had 2 work sessions where we brought in outside experts or outside perspectives. The first was a youth panel where we brought together youth from different parts of the city to speak to their experiences as it relates to violence. And that was an incredibly impactful panel for the advisory council. Gave a lot of sense as to the challenges that they face and the ideas and things that we need to be doing as we move forward. The second work session was with an expert in anti-violence initiatives. This was an expert, his name's Thomas Apt. He works at the Council on Criminal Justice, and he's also been a senior official in the Department of Justice. He brought a very valuable evidence-informed perspective on what other cities and other states and what nationally has been proven to be effective. And so through all of those discussions, through those presentations, this advisory council was able to consider that as they ultimately put together this recommendations report.
It's also worth noting, the question's been asked, our commitment to our officers. Today, our officers will see in their paychecks the final phase of increasing their pay, which was the commitment that we made to the pay increase, the largest pay increase, 30% in the history of APD. You know, we've talked about this. This year has been a challenging year across the country. But as Chief Bryan mentioned, if you've ever questioned our commitment from the administration standpoint and the commitment of our officers, you don't have to look any further than looking at the body cam footage of the shooting a couple of weeks ago in Midtown, where this officer, elevator door opens, someone opens fire, the officer is on the ground, and he still manages, after being shot twice, to be able to unload his weapon. And they never skipped a beat. So our officers are continuing to run into danger to protect us all. In this administration and me personally, I continue to be grateful for the sacrifices that they make each and every day, and will continue to do all we can do to support our officers. And there have been questions, and you know, it's interesting just how things get turned around, even discussions on defund the police and where I stood on that. We didn't pass that in Atlanta. And had it been passed, I would have vetoed it. But the story that has not publicly been told, and the day on that vote, I personally called council members who I thought were on the fence or on the verge of supporting that, and asked them not to support it. And I told them why. And thankfully, that did not happen in this city. So, you know, relationships can sometimes hit bumps in the road. We're all human. But it doesn't mean that we aren't still focused on what's most important, and that's the safety of our public and our communities. And then before we open up for questions, before the pandemic, as you all know, we reopened the investigation into the Atlanta missing and murdered children. This was a very, very painful time in our city's history. I know Michael Langford, Brenda Muhammad, and many others here today remember that time very well, experienced it. There were murders of innocent children and young people in our city that went unsolved for many years. Part of my asking that this be reopened was in light of where we are with DNA testing some 40 years later. What, if anything, more could we take a look at to make sure that we have examined everything possible to make sure that the person or people responsible are being held accountable? A few things have happened since we reopened this. Thus far, investigators have methodically reviewed an estimated 40% of the collected evidence to determine which items can be submitted for additional processing to a private lab. On June 21st, we have moved forward with that processing. We are not sharing the names of the victims that we were able to extract DNA for testing because we want to be mindful of the integrity of the investigation. This private lab has extensive experience in the field of analyzing deteriorated DNA and has a successful history in providing evidence in high-profile nationwide murder cases. Fiber evidence was reanalyzed in all 30 of the cases, and investigators have also extended the timeline from 1970 to 1985 to see if there are any additional children or victims that perhaps have been overlooked. I believe there are 2 cases, Chief Bryan can correct me if I'm wrong, that we have been able to send off DNA for additional analysis. So we certainly hope to have that information back over the next few months. Hopefully, before I leave office, I hope that we're able to get it back. But if not, I trust that whomever the next mayor is will keep this as a priority. And it's truly my hope that with the analysis of this additional DNA, that we can have some additional answers. Also, there is the art memorial that is now at Hartsfield Jackson with portraits of all of the children. And we are also moving forward with the placing of the eternal flame on the grounds of City Hall. So we will continue to keep you updated. Thank you, Chief Bryan, and to all of the officers who have continued this important work. And also, I just want to, again, thank our advisory council for this dedication and very thoughtful work that they've given to us. And also, thank you to John Keene, our Chief Operating Officer, Carmen Chubb, our Chief of Staff, LaShondra Burks, our DCOO. I see Jerome Jordan, our Deputy Chief of Staff. I don't know if I'm missing anybody else. Curtis. I see Curtis over here in his work clothes from Constituent Services, and just to all of our leaders in the city. You know, it goes without saying this has been a difficult year, but our leaders have not stopped. They have worked day in and day out, more hours than any of us could begin to imagine, with a dedication and a focus on keeping the city going. And I think sometimes that gets lost when things don't go wrong. We often don't recognize what it takes to make things go right. So thank you to all of our leaders, our senior leaders, for the work that you've done, and thank you to our employees. So with that, I'll take any questions you may have. Yeah, and this is the same man who didn't know that the coronavirus could be spread by asymptomatic people until we were several months into the pandemic. So I don't make any assumptions about what he knows to be true and to be fact. But it's election season. And I'm not the one who held a shotgun on a 14-year-old to show people that I was tough on crime. We've been doing the work. And it's unfortunate that we don't have the leadership and the partnership that we need. It's unfortunate that fingers are being pointed, and I believe he placed blame on city leadership for the metro area. I'm the mayor of Atlanta. He's the governor of the entire state. So when I Googled this morning to look at crime stats for the state, when I got to the GBI website, maybe my phone's a little slow, I saw crime stats up to 2018. So I know what the stats are in Atlanta because I get them every single week from our chief. We share it with our cabinet. We have a full discussion in our cabinet every week on what crime is in Atlanta, and we publish it. I don't know what the stats are in the state. So I would begin by asking the question, what are you doing about the job that you have? Because I've been true to the commitments I made when I ran for mayor. But I can't say the same for him.
Mayor, could you talk also about the program that in PUV that you said has been very impressive, some of the details that you'd like to see expanded to the entire city?
Yes, and I will let John give you more details on the Cure Violence program and MPUV. We have seen it was funded by the Annie E. Casey Foundation, private funds, also with the support of Chris 180, and it has given us the results that we really need throughout the city. So I will let John give more details on that.
I'll just highlight a couple things. There are some places that we can point you all to get some great details on this work. As the mayor mentioned, funded by the Annie E. Casey Foundation in partnership with Chris 180. It's based on a specific evidence-based program called Cure Violence, which is led by an organization called Cure Violence Global. And ultimately, it's based in the community. It's based in finding credible messengers that can work within these communities in order to disrupt violence and make sure that retaliatory violence doesn't happen, make sure that people are there to help and to listen and to provide therapy and other community-based services. And as the mayor mentioned, it's proven to be very effective. What we've already seen in our pilot program has shown the decreases in violence, decreases in homicides, and the evidence is nationwide.
Mayor Bottoms, the plan proposes a $70 million increase in spending, of which $50 million will be public funds. The state passed a 5% rule on police spending, the sort of anti-defund law that was passed. What portion of that money would come under the cap?
Well, what we'll have to look at it, certainly when you have a budget, it's going to be at the expense of something else. But what I know is that when our communities aren't safe or when they don't feel safe, nothing else really matters. And so people will have to understand that for us to implement these recommendations, we are going to have to cut somewhere else. Where that is, we will best determine. But if you recall, in transitioning from our jail and our employees, we were able to reallocate many of the funds and personnel from our correction staff into some of this community-based work. And so the great thing with our CFO and with John, who has a very extensive professional background, we bring a very different approach into how we look at how we spend our funds in the city and how we allocate and reallocate. And you know, it's my hope that this is not the last tranche of funding that we will see from the federal government. As I was on the call yesterday, many other cities and everybody's budget is different and their needs are different. Many cities have committed much more than we had the 5 million. So we know that there is still room for us to grow in that space, and now having these solid recommendations, we have a pretty good idea of what that framework should be.
I fear I may have been misunderstood when I asked the question, and that's my fault. If the budget for the police department increases by $50 million, it would obligate whoever follows to cut it by no more than 5%.
No, we didn't say it would necessarily be an increase. One of the recommendations is to stand up a completely separate office, a violence intervention office. So it may or may not fall within the police budget. We also have the support of the Police Foundation and other partners. So it really is too soon to speculate. But as we know, the vast majority of our budget right now goes toward public safety between police and Atlanta Fire Rescue. So it's a big portion of our budget anyway. So it may expand, it may not.
Monday, the lawmakers at the Capitol are going to have a meeting on public safety. Governor Kemp said yesterday he's going to be testifying there. They mentioned they wanted to invite you to hear from you. Have they reached out yet? And what's your take on presenting to them about fighting crime?
I'm not aware of an invitation. Jerome's shaking his head. Carmen's shaking her head. So I've not received an invitation to speak. You know, but as my mother says, you only have to tell the truth once. And the truth is this: we are committed to public safety in Atlanta. I've not had a discussion with the governor on what our needs are. So it's really interesting that he speaks to our shortcomings. And you know, it's election season. That is what it is. But I'm not running. My name's not on the ballot this year. So I don't have to speak in re-election talking points. Our commitment remains our commitment. We've not wavered from that.
If they do reach out, you're open to speaking with them?
We'll see.
Mayor, does the city council have to vote on the implementation of any of these recommendations?
That would be a question for our COO. There may be some things, anytime we set up a new department, that has to go through the legislative process. So I would expect there may be some things, and when we start reallocating budget money and we had set forth some legislation before council on how we would spend our American Rescue Fund money. So if we make some reallocation of those funds, then certainly that's likely to have to go through council.
And how will you measure the success and impact of these recommendations?
We'll continue to see if our crime numbers are dropping. We've had a data-driven approach from day one. John, I mentioned John's professional experience. John came from Deloitte. So we're constantly looking at data and analyzing data. We're not pulling it out of the sky and coming up with nice sound bites on why things are working, why they aren't working. We're looking at data. And it is going to be extremely helpful, I believe, when we can drill down that data, with one of the recommendations being, let's get more specific, more focused geographically on where we are putting our efforts. So, you know, we have a lot of data, and I think we'll continue to get even more to tell us if we're headed in the right direction. And again, part of what's so wonderful about the support of the White House, we're getting technical assistance. I cannot stress to you enough what that means. We have almost 9,000 employees. We have a limited amount of resources and employees. But when you have the White House coming in and saying we are putting hands on deck and we are going to help you all with this, that goes a very long way. And we are very fortunate to be one of 15 cities who've been chosen to participate.
You've already exceeded your goal of hiring 1,000 young people through city programs. You said you hired 1,400 young people. Are you planning to track their progress and their life? And additionally, do you have a new benchmark for hiring young people?
Yeah, this is, this is a commitment. So part of it, obviously, is putting them to work, getting money in their pockets. But the other part is staying engaged and also making sure that we're able to meet them at their point of need. I was really glad yesterday I just signed off Mayor's Youth Scholarship Fund. How many are we giving out this year? Over 60 kids are getting at least $2,000 through the Mayor's Youth Scholarship Fund, or $2,000 per semester, $4,000 a year, up to $10,000 a year. So this is an ongoing commitment on our behalf.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have time for 2 more questions.
He's new. Some of them are immediate. Some are the expansion of Cure Violence is a phased-in approach. I believe with the last phase of it being March of 2022. So all of the recommendations are immediate recommendations, but some will take a little more time to implement. As you know, our commitment to the 250 officers goes through next fiscal year. The expansion of the camera network, I mentioned the light up expansion that goes through December of 2022.
KPD put out a warning today about scooter crimes. Put out video on Instagram, and I think it was 7 incidents. Do you have any updates on how the investigation is?
Yes, well, we are clearly working with the mayor's offices and ADOT as it relates to what we're seeing with scooters. We recognize that they are a problem. As much as they are a convenience for some, they're problematic for us. And so we are continuing to work with those entities to see how we can better police what's going on as it relates to utilizing scooters and crime. As your question is where we are with the investigation, they continue to be ongoing. We continue to solicit the information from the community on anything that they have as it relates to crime. But right now, those all are still ongoing investigations.
Sorry, that's the last question. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance today.
Thank you. We like the new guy. All right.
Oh, yes. Council people advisable, we want to take some photos real quick, so please don't